Welcome back to the North Florida Wrestling Show. We had a great tournament at North Bay Haven this past weekend as a part of the Tristate series. I myself got to attend it. Probably the only one I get to attend this summer or this series because of soccer. But very glad to. On the show again, we have Coach Jason Westlager. Was not able to attend, but was watching very closely from afar in Tallahassee. Jason, what was your? Did you get any feedback from the tournament from where you were at?
Yeah, I actually got a good bit of feedback from some people that were just trying it out for the first time. That we had a gentleman travel from Tampa Bay, Pinellas County. We had some others travel from far away, and they immediately messaged me as soon as trying it and absolutely loved it. I think this software, Leighton's kind of figured it out, and it's working really well. And I wasn't able to make the event. Zane has run one of these before, but I think he can tell you that as a director, it's extremely simple to run, and it's just good for wrestling. So I got a lot of really positive feedback. The team score thing worked as advertised. A lot of people don't realize the behind the scenes, but Leighton spent until late Friday night, 22 hours straight, coding out, getting the team scores ready for us. Nobody really sees that, but I want to thank him if he's listening to this for getting that all squared away. And so team scores got corrected this time around, and all the round robins were scored. And I think overall it sounded like an excellent event. Again, I wasn't able to make it due to illness in my family, but from what I hear, Zane and team did an awesome job.
Well, speaking of Zane, he was able to actually pop in the studio right now. Zane, how you doing, brother? And
Oh, good.
I saw you. Yeah, I saw you at the thing sitting up there. Looked like a pretty easy day for you, relatively.
Yeah, man. You know how it is. As long as you're shooting those texts and communicating, they make it as easy as they can. So yeah, it's nice to actually get to coach some, run around, check on other things. Not even related to wrestling. It worked out.
So, let me ask you this from a tournament, from running it point of view. What were some pros and cons that you ran into throughout the day?
So pros, we really got the war zone going on this one. Whenever they're done with their bracket, if they want to get more matches, they can enter in on the pool. So just, emphasizing that to people, I think a lot of kids got as many matches as they wanted to get. I swear I read some of the same names like 12 times, but if they want to get more mat time, man, more power to them. And, as the rating system pairs them up, if they're still willing to keep going higher and higher, sometimes that might be a weight disadvantage, but sometimes that equals out, especially in the young ages. So pros was just seeing a lot of wrestling. People seemed to get what they wanted if they wanted more or if they didn't. And then only cons, but this is not even really a big thing because I know it's coming in a few weeks, is just the requested matchup. So I know you'll have kids come up sometimes and be like, hey, we want to wrestle each other. And that's not quite a feature yet, but I know that in the next 2, 3 weeks, I think that's supposed to be coming.
Yeah. From what I've heard, he calls them challenge matches that you can
Yeah.
just go in the system, pick your opponent, and basically like request with whoever's running the Warzone pairing. Future reference for Zane, and you may already know this, but any future directors in this series, if that comes up and somebody says, hey, Zane comes up to you as a tournament director and says, Jordan and I want to wrestle. On the director side, it's as simple as shooting a text to whoever's running the pairings, most of the time Leighton, and just saying, hey, pair Jordan and Zane on mat, whatever. And I'm sure you know that, Zane, but just for future, if there's any other, bunch
Yeah,
of directors yet
So
to come.
absolutely.
I actually have a couple questions. I know I had one just popped into my mind, which we'll get to, but so one that I'm interested on both y'all's opinions on is with the Warzone, where once you're out of your bracket, you can get as many matches you want. Where do you stand on kids double bracketing? Because I know some of my kids in the Warzone got like 2 or 3 extra matches, and then I had a couple that didn't get any. Like Steven, we were there for about an hour after his bracket, and he didn't catch a Warzone because a lot of the kids were double bracketing. So we're waiting
Hmm.
for like these matchups to get done, which I understand.
Hmm.
Jason, your point of on before was that they're trying to get 2 shots at the belt, but does it kind of defeat the purpose of the Warzone or slow it down? In your opinions?
Yeah, the only thing I saw is when they were double bracketed, and they would literally be up. on each mat. You know what I mean? So like they're on mat one, but they're also on deck mat two. And if there was one behind it to select, that's as simple as telling the table workers go and grab that next one, let it roll. But I see what you're saying. There's less people in the war zone if they're double bracketing. Uh, but I'm not against them paying twice and wanting to do both if they're willing to understand. You're going to be kind of back to back. Uh,
Yeah.
and I guess it guarantees them. But yeah, it's all a game. That's the one thing we told some parents when they weren't getting any matches. I'm like, well, there's a number of factors of if their score's super high and they've already hammered everybody else in that range, the algorithm won't necessarily pair them. And then that's just when we can kind of ask if they come up and go, hey, Leighton, can we get this kid a match? I know he's already maybe wrestled some of these kids, but they're looking to get one or two more. So I think it's just trying to communicate throughout it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing with that is parents have been trained essentially that if you want the extra matches, you have to double bracket. And so everybody's just kind of used to it. I think as this software kind of makes its rounds and, hopefully gets used for some bigger events outside of this series, what you're going to find is people just realize they don't have to double bracket anymore, because there's no charge to this. It's absolutely free. You literally do your one bracket, and
Yep.
then if you want to stay and do war zones for an hour, great. If you and your entire weight bracket wants to stay for 8 hours and just keep wrestling each other, you can do that. And so the need to double bracket goes away with this software and kind of what they've brought to the table. It's so new yet that I don't think people quite realize that. And then to the point I made earlier is that the way we're running this series is you've got to have 4 tournament championships to be eligible for the belt. So you win 4 tournaments and then you back it up with the finale win, you get the belt. Well, I'm not discriminating on whether that's, go ahead and enter 4 brackets if you want. You just got to walk away with 1 tournament championship out of the thing. And so I think people realize that and they're just entering a bunch. I've seen a whole bunch triple brackets as well. So uh, I think in the future you're going to see less and less of double bracketing just because there's no reason to do it. But for now, I think it's just kind of one of those things based on the format of the series.
So actually, another question that I had that you might be able to answer, because speaking of like new, don't know how to use yet, I was explaining to a lot of parents who were there for the first time, and then I came across the coaches app, and I know this was something that I was, when it first came out, I was asking questions on. How can a coach get their wrestlers wars access to their war zone? So if their parent can't make a competition, or if they're riding with a friend, like is there a way for it to be like, okay, hey, coach, you're able to choose the matches or put them in the war zone, or is there something available like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So for that specific instance, like kid rides with you to the tournament, it's as simple as going into their profile and changing the number to yours for the day. And then they can, you can change that back and forth. As far as like getting text for your entire team, that does not exist yet, as far as I know. I don't want to speak for the company, um, but I don't believe that exists. As far as coaches go, we're basically able to look through our entire team's roster, and then we get not notifications, but within our little dashboard there, we can see that Abel Wesolowski is in the hole on mat one. Dom Seco in the hole on mat three, et cetera, et cetera. That's as far as it goes for now. I've spoken to him a number of times about trying to get notifications. I don't know how close that's coming. But for coaches right now, the best we got is to, look throughout that dashboard or just look around the mats and see that we got a kid coming up. Not perfect, but I think there's so many other good things with the software that I'll take that for now.
I gotcha. Well, it was an awesome tournament. It was really well run. Zane put on an awesome tournament. The refereeing was phenomenal, from the veteran officials like Rob Hazelwinkle down to Bear Siegel out there running them. Very well composed. The whole thing was fantastic. I loved it. Actually, another thing, I'm glad, Zane, that you popped on, and because had a little thread going on one of your posts, Zane. It's funny because I was asking about the same thing, because like I have a lot of curiosities and anxieties about taking over on a head coaching, especially coming from a club. So I emailed the FHSA director the exact thing that you're talking about, as the distinction of what can a high school coach do with, outside entities, or what can a club coach do with outside entities. And he emailed me the same thing as you, saying that as long as it was AAU in a different place, it's a different thing.
Yep.
So where can you elaborate on your take on that? Because I think we have a similar one, but I think a lot of people are apprehensive to do stuff because they don't want to get caught with their hand in a cookie jar that they didn't know about.
Right. And so that's where I was coming from. I'm a real transparent person, so I'll tell you just sort of vaguely what was going on was I had two different parents, where two different coaches in our area contacted them claiming that, these things were happening and there was going to be kickback and they might want to be cautious about this, that, and the other with the club practices. And I'm like, I want to do things the right way, but I wasn't 100% sure that what they were saying wasn't true. I was pretty sure, but I can't rest until I know. So I read about all 160 pages of the FHSA handbook and the wrestling handbook and the NFHS and the AAU rules just to, I like being right, but I also want to make sure, I'm doing the right thing. So yeah, I think what has happened is there were probably older rules, and I think coaches have propagated those rules for so long that they do believe that the head coach of a high school program cannot be a part of coaching a club program. I think there's people that legitimately believe that's true. I don't think there's malice in kind of that approach, but from what I read, it's written very clearly that if and it defines a coach, and it doesn't, and coach includes a paid person from the school, a volunteer from the school, anybody that is not even affiliated with the school is how they define coach. As long as they're ran through AAU or USA, you're welcome to do your practices in the off season whenever you want. Uh, and even during the season, kids are welcome to go and participate at a club. And you see that at Well Trained, and you've seen it at Grappling House, and you've seen it at, PJ's program. You can go through every top program. They all have that, kids coming in on Sunday through AAU and getting a little extra work in. Uh, and so we're good there. And even what's really interesting is as you get as you get through it, you see that in the summer there's almost no regulation by the FHSA whatsoever. You just
Well,
obviously need to make sure you're insured.
yeah,
But
because it's got nothing to do with AAU or anything like that. Like, my biggest concern is, like, I don't want to be at a tri-state series tournament that I get to make, and be like,
yep,
okay, I'm the high school coach now, but then see a kid from my club and have anxiety about, like, sitting in their corner, and then
well,
get called
and
for recruiting or something like that. Or like it would be the same if I went in a tournament and I had a kid that, like, didn't have a coach. I would be like, hey, Jay, like, I would expect Jason to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stand in that kid's corner. I'm not worried about him trying to, like, steal a kid away
100%.
from me. Yeah.
100%. And imagine you're in Wewa Hitchcock, right? You have 300 kids at your high school. The number of people in that area that can coach wrestling, isn't tremendous. What do you do? Do you have to go and find someone to be your club coach? Or do you just say, I can't do off season because I'm the only guy with coaching experience in this area? What do you do for those rural areas? It just wouldn't be sustainable. And so, yeah, it's good. The only thing I did stumble into that, I kind of do want to share, and I told Jason as well, is there are rules regarding wearing high school team gear at AAU stuff. So they to kind of keep and protect yourselves just from that distinction. It was just making sure they have a different singlet. It shouldn't say anywhere on there in Iceville or North Bay Haven or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's the best way coaches can protect themselves is make sure that it's a very clear distinction. Obviously, make sure all your kids have their membership cards and they're associated with your club. So you can always prove, hey, yes, here's his AAU stuff. Here's it attached to my club. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating, what people will say to these poor kids to try to keep them doing from things they don't want them to do. But it's from what I can tell, as long as you got that AAU separation and your insurance is covered, and it's fair game.
Dude, so that's good to hear. I like the maybe I gotta reach out to the director, get him on just to get that on get an official
Yeah,
audio clip of it. But I'm glad you cleared that up, made me feel a lot better because I'm just here to work with kids. Like, I'm
exactly.
not obviously when I'm with the nice club, I'm like, hey, we're trying to build a program here, but I'm not trying to do stuff maliciously. I'm trying to build a
Mhm.
culture. I'm trying to, like, and here's my thing too, if there's a kid that, like, he's like, I feel like my chances are better at this other place, with this other coach, like, I do my best not to take it personally. I'd be like,
Yeah,
that's his own decision. Because I made that same decision And I was very lucky. My coaches understood.
I've been on the receiving end and losing end of it plenty. I lost a number 3 ranked heavyweight to Mosley this year. And then I gained a kid from Arnold that's been with our club for 3 years. And so it's give and take. And even like I know when I lost Ethan Pickering to South Walton, that was a tough loss. I knew that kid since he was like 6 years old, running in the room, jumping on top of me. But he felt Travis and South Walton were the best setup for him for that last year or two, and I still went to his graduation, and I was still invited to his signing day, and I still chat with those kids when they come back home. So I mean, it's if you want what's best for the kids, I think you understand that. You're going to help them wherever they're at. You're going to support them wherever they're at. You want it to be with you, but if it's not at the end of the day, it
It's
should be
not
about the
about you.
kids and not about you. Absolutely right. And I think, it's like you said, I've always loved this area because I've jumped in and coached Niceville kids before when I've seen maybe you have 4 kids all up at once or someone's just not there or whatever. I've done it for the other Bay County teams. They've done it for me. And I love that kind of mentality we get in the Panhandle because you don't necessarily see it in big metropolitan areas all the time.
Well, so we actually got a question from Mr. Nate Solario. He's asking, and you might know the answer to this question: if a school does not have an official girls' high school team, can we still attend our school and compete for another school that does offer a full girls' team and coach?
Yep, and that's an interesting question because I've seen that differ from county to county, right? And so at South Walton, I know that with their charter school, because they didn't offer any sports, they had a number of kids that wrestled for South Walton because they didn't offer any type of wrestling. So they would attend class at that school, and then as long as they provide their own transportation, they could show up and practice. So Bay County is a little weird. We have a new county ID, new superintendent, and so we're trying to make sure, that that's on the up and up with different people that are curious about it. Because there's plenty of, I mean, homeschool kids are still questionable in Bay County. There's not a consistent answer to that. We have plenty of charter schools. It's huge in Bay County right now that don't offer sports, and they want their kids to compete at another charter school because it has a lot of the same values that they prioritize. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a good question, and we're still trying to figure that part out.
Man, if you while you're figuring that out, I would love to see because I know we talked about this the last time we talked, but I'm legitimately curious if you have like a kid that is a seventh grader or an eighth grader at a middle school team that doesn't offer middle school wrestling, can he pop over to the high school and wrestle just like these kids that are at a North Bay Haven, a Florida High, a Somerset? Like,
Yep.
why should those kids get that advantage over a kid that could so for me, I feel like I said I could have legitimately competed as an eighth grader at 103 at the time of what it was. Would I have been a placer? Probably not, but could I have lucked up and got to state and had that experience under my belt coming as a true freshman? Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility. So like my son, he's starting to get better next year. As an eighth grader, I might look at him and be like, I'd throw you against the senior. Like you might take a beating, but I'd rather you have to wrestle up instead of not getting challenged as much. Not saying because like there's a huge youth movement growing, but someone like for Jason, Bear Wesolowski or John Chaney, who next year could compete with some high school kids, and do fairly well. How well that's depends, but I'd put them out there. Like so, why should they not have that opportunity?
I'm all about it. And you see, we've had kids in Bay County before. I know Nick Hayco was one where he went to a school he didn't want to go to because it was the only one at the time where middle schoolers could compete. He came down from New York where he was wrestling varsity as long as they have different requirements. He had to actually do a physical test to prove that at his age he could hang with the high schoolers. So it's almost like a waiver they get. So when he came down here and it wasn't an option unless he went to a certain school, they chose one that they probably wouldn't have chose otherwise, and then they had to hop schools after he gets into high school to get to where they wanted to be. So yeah, I'm a little libertarian at heart, so I'm all about the hands off of, yeah, if they don't offer it and, we're allowing 6 through 12 to wrestle at the state series, they should be able to go to a school, within reason of where they're trying to be, as long as they're handling their transportation and all those things that come with any other kid that's alternative.
I want to jump in with a different perspective with this because I kind of like the Florida rules, but they're just backwards to me coming from Pennsylvania, where there's a whole different set of rules. They're governed by PIAA, and the guy that chimed in, Nate Solorio, his daughter actually wrestled in Pennsylvania this year. and then came back. So they're kind of familiar with the rules too. And so in PA, you wrestle ninth, 12th grade, and that is it. Sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, they wrestle junior high seasons if their school has them. If not, they do their youth stuff or AAU, which up there they call it PAJW. And that's about it. And then whatever county you reside in is where you wrestle. If they don't have a school for you, like if wrestling isn't offered at, I don't know, Lincoln here in Tallahassee or Florida High in Tallahassee, they find the nearest school and you do some paperwork to co-op with them, and then you can attend at Florida High and then go wrestle at Lincoln. But other than that, you wrestle where you're from, where you reside. There's very, very strict rules about, hey, I live here, but I'm gonna try to like pull a fast one and go like pretend like my aunt's address is mine over there, 100 miles away. And next thing you know, you're sitting for a year. There's a lot that I don't like about that, but there's a lot that I like just with it being straightforward. And like, there's no questioning who can do what and where. It's like, these are the rules. They're very, very finite. And that is it. I really do like the idea that my sixth, seventh, and eighth graders get the opportunity to go to like a Florida High or North Bay Haven, where they can try it early. A kid like Jasper was a perfect example where, in seventh grade, I think he started over there and he did okay, but not phenomenal. But he got a taste of that high school experience early, and I sure as heck know that made him a lot better for eighth grade. Sure as heck know that eighth grade made him a lot better for ninth, probably better than regular IOF series would have done. So there's a lot of value to that. It's just different to me, and I'm still adjusting. I mean, we're almost on year 7 that I've been down here, and it's still very different to me. But I really do like the sixth, seventh, and eighth thing that can get in. It's just strange to me that North Bay Haven can have the sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, but Niceville's not allowed.
Right.
But they're only allowed because it's a K through 12 campus. Like,
Right.
it just seems like an odd rule to me.
Maybe just a thing of someone no one's ever asked. Like,
Yeah.
Perhaps. I don't know. I would love to hear more about that. Like, why is it that a charter school gets that benefit and not? And I mean, I know the rule reads, or at least I've heard it reads, that it's because you're all on the same campus.
Right. Well,
What's to stop me from drawing a line between my campuses and saying like a paved road between all three of my campuses?
Dude, it's crazy that you say something like that because, like, over at Niceville, if you guys ever get over here, at Niceville and Ruckle Middle School is literally like they're right next to each other, like.
well, and if
But
you look
I
at
wouldn't even be talking about this though if Bay County, Okaloosa County, Walton County had middle school wrestling, had something
Yep.
for these kids to do.
That's the
You
big
know,
thing.
exactly. Well, and I agree with you somewhat, Jason, because I like having the flexibility of it, and I'm a little more open on what I think kids should be able to do. But I just want it to be the same. Walton County shouldn't be different than Bay County, which shouldn't be different than Leon County, which shouldn't be different than Okaloosa.
Right.
If it's gonna be that these charter kids can go to South Walton, then we have a sister school, Bay Haven, which is only K-8. I can't take any of those kids, despite it all being under the same company, organization, everything else. I can't use any of those kids. They can come through our club, but we can't use them since they're on a separate physical campus location, even though it's the same technical,
Yeah.
school and company. And so, it's interesting. And I do agree that like with Jasper, eighth grade year, at one point he's ranked number 1 in the state. Does he benefit from only being able to do IOFs and some local things like that, or does he develop better? Again, if it's all about the kid, does he develop better getting that high school season?
dude, it's
I
just
would say the
it's
high school season.
there's so the kids now are just so far developed. Like I remember
My
at least
gosh,
back
yeah.
in my we still had those like eighth grade, like Scotty Sentez was in the finals, Rocky Kozart. We had a couple, but now it seems like there's just so many like I was looking at the brackets last year, like at 106 for 1A, it's like there was like 3 seventh graders and an eighth grader in the
Yep.
semifinals. I'm like, this is bananas, dude. Like the level of
106 is owned by middle schoolers right now. I
dude,
mean, it
yeah,
really is.
and it has
True.
nothing to do with their weight either.
Last year in Jasper's bracket, all 4 were sixth, seventh, or eighth graders. Actually,
It's,
maybe sixth or seventh graders. I don't even know that there was an eighth.
it's insane how they've developed, and yeah, it's crazy. I like seeing it. I like seeing the idea that you could be a 7-time state champ. I think is really cool. Uh, I just I do think like you're saying, that it should be across the board then if we're going to do it. If there's no middle school wrestling in your
That's it.
county, then they should be able to come up to the high school and compete. And maybe it is something like New York does, where can you do X amount of pull-ups, X amount of push-ups and X amount of time, just for the safety of the kids too, because
Sure.
there's plenty of times we just forfeited weight classes. When I first got here, 9 of my starting 14 were middle schoolers. We just invested young. We didn't, juniors and seniors are great, but you can only do so much in a year or two. And there were plenty of times where, however coaches felt about it, I'm like, I just can't throw that kid out there. I had a sixth grader who weighed 215, and that's a
Yeah,
man's weight class. There's some big boys up there. And, I'm not throwing that 11-year-old out against some of them, and some of them are respectable enough. Like David Mercado is one of the sweetest kids. If you have a soft, new, young kid, whatever, he's not going to be physical with them. He's not, going to embarrass them by any means. And there's great kids like that. But sometimes you look at that kid and you're like, he doesn't know us. And I don't know that it's worth throwing him out there for that one. But I do like the idea of maybe some type of physical competency test if we're going to allow schools that aren't K-12 to have it. Okay, cool. Then whatever middle schools by Niceville, you can do these requirements and them and they're clear and they're the same for everyone. Then you can compete.
that's it. That's that. I guess that's my only real beef with it. I love the idea that we're letting the sixth, seventh, and eighthers in, but why is it? I'm trying to think of how to put it correctly here. Why can only certain kids get in because they just happen to go to a private school? And I don't know what fees. I know Florida High does a lottery that you got to kind of lottery your way into Florida High. I don't know what North Bay Haven's like, and I really don't know the landscape of any of these around. But why can only certain kids get to have that experience? Because I'm going to be honest with you, you are going to develop better in a high school wrestling room going 5 days a week, 3 hours a day than you would in a
100%.
club room where you're going, I get my kids 4 or 5 hours a week and then some tournaments on the weekend. You're going to
Yep.
develop. I don't care if I'm Jordan Burroughs coaching out there, if I'm John Smith coaching out there. Zane, you're going to have a better success getting that kid better because you get 15 hours with them and I get 4 with them.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
that's what it
and
comes
even
down to.
and even the expectations, because you don't lower the expectations in the room just because middle schoolers are in there. And so we kind
Absolutely.
of saw that first year or two when we did get a chance, like when we go to Gulf Shores, ninth grade's still middle school. So we got to enter those kids with people their age for once, after they were getting hammered for the beginning of the year. And like we dominated that tournament. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize my middle schoolers were that good and my young kids were that good because they're always wrestling so much older.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're like you said, we're doing 5 days, full practices, and the bar doesn't lower just because they're in there, and I give them credit all the time. I'm like, guys, what I was doing at the Surfside practice room was nothing like what we're doing here, and they stick it out. But you're 100% right. It's not even.
Yeah.
How would you like to see like K through 12 schools or charter schools go into their own separate division? Like I know that that was something talked about when I was going through because Jupiter Christian, Cardinal Gibbons had beaten Swanee out for the state championship by a couple points, and
Hmm.
we were a little salty about that. And that was something that was kind of a topic. They're like, should these kids that these places that can technically, like Cardinal Gibbons, can technically recruit, sort of. That's what
Well,
Ivan Lupinchansky was a previous guest was saying with him. He's like, I kind of got recruited to go there. Should they be in their own division separate from 1A, 2A, and 3A?
it's hard, right? Because it's one of those. I've always kind of thought maybe private schools should be in that boat, but that was when you have Lake Highland Preps that were number 3 in the nation, wrestling in the smallest division of Florida, and I'd have had a bunch of more state champions at Arnold had they not been in the way. But it's hard, right? Because you have different levels of charter schools. Like what Clay Allen's done at Florida High is insane. If you look at where he started to where they are now, I mean that's a lot of work, and I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that the inherited advantage showed real quick. Now, if he'd have been, and not calling anyone out, Bosucci's an amazing coach, but Somerset has kids that we keep seeing right after 8th grade slide into South Dade right after. And so, with Clay not having, a program going, okay, go to Florida High for your middle school years and then come to us for high school, it's not the same advantage sometimes. Uh, but no, I get it. I could see the argument for it, maybe a private and a charter school group, but it's harder for us sometimes to get kids in than it is a public school. we often have kids that are interested in coming over and they don't get in on the lottery, or they're nervous that it's going to happen too late and they jump to another school where it's easier to get into, you know?
That's crazy you just said because Mr. Chris Connor said with the lottery, good luck recruiting. His kids are going to jump ship instead of wanting to get in. So you kind of nailed that perfectly.
That's my brother. Shout out.
No, but it makes sense. I'm glad you shouted out Clay Allen because I think he's what
Okay.
ranked sixth on the Florida Wrestling Room for them,
hmm
which
They
he's
got
been
a.
quietly building up a good program.
I was looking at it last year because I was like, all right, I like to see who's graduating and then, what the weight classes might look like pretty early on. And I was looking at Florida and I'm like, man, none of those kids are gone. Almost nobody they had last year is gone. And I mean, again, where he started with that program to now, I remember one of the first times I saw him when he was at Florida High. We were in a seating meeting, which I missed, by the way, the
I ain't got to
posturing
do
and
seating
everything
meetings
else.
no more.
Not really. You kind of show up
Oh,
and
dude.
track auto does it, and then if there's a little tweak we do, but it's not as fun as it used to be. But the first time I saw Clay in a seating meeting, he had his iPad up, he had his volume on max, and he was playing Angry Birds while the coaches were like angrily arguing. You just hear boom, boom, boom,
Dude,
boom.
that's my boy.
I go,
Hey,
Clay, what are you doing? He's like, I ain't got
m-
anybody worth seating anyway.
yeah, dude, my philosophy is just throw him in a random generator and let's see who falls out on top.
Right, Swanee boy. I,
But he's
Old
got
man
he's
Laxton, Old man Laxton.
he
Every time I was in a seating meeting with him when he was still coaching for a minute, he'd be like, "The cream will rise to the top." I said, "We just draw
baby, and
names
I
out of a
am the
hat."
cream, son. Dude, but Clay, if Clay, like he's been building a program, and
Yep.
speaking of middle school wrestlers, like I know Jason's got a couple of those kids in the Tallahassee area at Grappling
Oh
House
yeah.
that if they slide into Florida High, they're gonna have a nasty team coming up in a couple of years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I, as a club coach, I don't tell my kids what to do and where to go. The parents all do that on their own. But I would agree if some kids get over to Florida High. I know we got a number going to Lincoln and Childs and all the different ones, but Florida High, man, they're coming up. I would argue that Lincoln has probably been the big boy in town here as far as recent, but that duel this year between Lincoln and Florida High is going to be close.
Yeah.
The thing that Clay has done very, very well that other programs haven't quite done around this area yet, with the exception of Wakulla, is they have middle school wrestling and they have a full K through 2 and a full 3 through 5 program that is pretty populated. I would say K through two's got 20 or 30 kids at any given time. They run it twice a year for 2.5 months, and then the 3 through 5 is 30 or 40 kids. And so when you have that coming up into middle school where they at least have some wrestling experience, it's certainly going to help you. Because the way it's been done around here, from what I understand, at least in Tallahassee, is you get these ninth graders who look athletic in the hallways, and you hope you can make something in 4 years, and it can be done. Lincoln has done phenomenal at it. I will give them that. I don't think I could do as good as they have with some of these kids.
Yeah. Shout out
But
to Vaniel.
yeah, man,
Who we
Van
saw this
Casero,
weekend. Woo!
he's a killer,
Woo!
man.
So I
Um,
asked somebody during the tournament, I said, what did he place last year? And I can't remember if it was like fifth or something like that. I said, he's way better than that. I mean,
yes,
I watched him wrestle James Oliver of ours, who's pretty solid, should be qualifier, borderline placer this year. Uh, and then I watched him wrestle Jasper in the finals, and I was like, that kid's going to be mean. That
yeah,
kid's going to be mean.
yeah,
And I know his
he's
coach told me he started as a freshman. And
that's
that's
it.
hard to do. That's so hard to do.
It's tough
Sorry.
to do. And so Clay and Florida High have done a really good job of getting that started early, which is what you need to do.
Mhm.
I did have one thing jumping back in the conversation quickly. I don't want to take up too much time here, but the private school versus non-private school and having their own division. Um, I I personally was a victim, not a victim, but when I was coaching up in Pennsylvania at the high school level, our team was ranked number 6 in the country, and we just so happened in the state semifinals to meet the team that was ranked number 2 in the country, Bethlehem Catholic, who most around the country know they're just phenomenal. But they have 14 kids, and of those 14, they're populated from 3 or 4 states that drive in to school every day and they stay on the campus, and basically like a Wyoming seminary or a Blair in the PIA. And so I was a victim of it, and it sucked, because I do think that the team that I was coaching was the best in the state from the public side of things. But on the flip side of that, I would much rather our kids have those experiences and get those get those matches. I don't. If you're going to say you're a state champion, then you're the best in the state in that division. Unfortunately, there's going to be some that recruit. Now, I don't like the out of state thing. If you're in Florida and you got a Georgia kid coming down to Lake Highland Prep, for example, I don't think he should be competing in FHSAA. But it's hard for me to say that we can't have private schools intermixed, because then where do you draw the line? That's my problem. It's not straightforward. There's so many examples that I could find of recruiting probably throughout the state of Florida that aren't official recruiting.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like somebody approaches somebody at a tournament and they're good friends with them and and it just one thing leads to another and they're going to a different school, but they didn't break any rules. And it's like, all right, well, if that's happening over there, but they're a public school, I don't know. In my opinion, you just lump them all together and the chips fly where they fly, man.
I get it. Go California style. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up because I know y'all got things to do. Your baby sounds like she got lots of things to do. Real quick, just to let everybody know, I put the link for this week's tournament up at Thomas County Central High School in Georgia for the Tri-State Tough Guy, Tough Girl Qualifier 3. Real quick, Jason, we did have one comment about that. Coach Alex Hill over here said that he had a great time. It was a really smooth experience and appreciated the war zone. The one improvement would be, and I agree with this one because my eyes are not as good as they used to be, is Matt side scoreboards easier to see, increased font or color contrast, as it was kind of hard to see. But other than that,
I got a point on that. And I found this out at the end of tournament 1, and I forgot to tell Zane. There is a full screen button, just like track. None of us do it because it's like hidden. It's kind of like obtusely in the corner or whatever. But for future, yes, there's a button, because right now, like if the screen is here, the scoreboard is like here that goes across, and you got kind of blank space up top. There's a button that'll make it the whole way. And then the contrasting scoring colors, I agree. We got like black on red, and that's hard to see. I mentioned that to Leighton. I don't think he's gotten to it yet, but I think that's one of those quick fixes that if I shoot him a text today, I think hopefully we could probably get by the weekend. So good call on that. That was on my radar, and it slipped my radar. So good call.
That's all right. Well, if that's the only complaint from a tournament, it's not a bad tournament. You know what I mean?
Yep. It was a good time.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate it. I'll see y'all around. We will see you next week on the Florida Wrestling Show to talk a little bit more wrestling.
Yes, sir. All
right. Thank you, guys.